There we go. Oh my gosh, this is good.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the fourth episode of the Think Outside podcast presented by Bates.com. I just walked in the door from the Bill Lewis Rattle Trap tournament at Sam Rayburn. Great success. And today, last week we really touched on forward thinking, forward facing sonar, kind of what the new trend is in bass fishing right now. And this week we're going to kind of dive back in time and what the, one of the best all time fish catchers is, the Bill Lewis Rattle Trap. Today, I'm joined by Wes Higgins. He's the brand manager for Bill Lewis, and he's actually from the family of Bill Lewis. Wes, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Joey. Nice to be on here tonight, and appreciate giving me the chance to kind of get into the roots and the history of Bill Lewis, and we can talk about how the Rattle Trap got started, and
Exactly.
Definitely a true American dream type of story. The way he got going.
Yeah, we're going to kind of touch on the story of it, how it came to be, the founder of the Rattle Trap. But we do have a very, very special guest for you guys today. We're joined by, he's going to hopefully load in here.
Here we go.
Bear with us with the internet. Mark, how you doing tonight, man? Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're on your off week between the BPT tour event. Thanks for joining us. You've kind of been with Bill Lewis since the beginning, I think you said 11 years or so, your sophomore year of your fishing career. Yeah. And, Wes, would you just kind of start from the beginning of the Bill Lewis Rattle Trap? Let's kind of start from there, and then we'll kind of bring in Mark throughout it. I'll ask some questions. Yep. We'll just kind of hang out and really embrace the story of an American dream.
Absolutely. Now, I will just forewarn you, if we're going to go into the history of Bill Lewis and the Rattle Trap, it goes way back before myself and Mark were around, and
totally.
but I know all about it because I grew up around Bill and I heard all the stories, and pretty interesting stuff for sure. He started out, he was from a little bitty town in Mississippi called Laurel, Mississippi. Another legendary guy in the fishing industry is from that same place, Paul Elias. I'm sure anybody that's been watching fishing their whole lives knows Paul Elias, right? But yeah, little Laurel, Mississippi. And as Bill's brother, who I called Uncle Jack, would tell me, when they were little kids, they would actually go out on the little main street in the town there and try to sell minnows. And Jack said that a lot of times all the minnows would die before they could even make their money back. And he's like, I was out on the fishing industry at age 9. He's like, but Bill stuck with it, But yeah, Bill, he, it didn't come immediately at all, the success. It actually came way later in life, like 50s, 60s years of age. But, the thing that he was like real well known for growing up, he was an incredible football player, had scholarship offers actually to like A&M, Alabama, Tennessee, Joey, your school, LSU. Everybody wanted him. But what happened, just like with so many guys in that era, they got called to war. So he went to World War II. He was a bomber pilot. He flew over 30 missions actually in World War II. Got like the Distinguished Flying Cross. So pretty cool. But when he came home, like football was an afterthought. And the funny thing about Bill, the thing that's unassuming, I guess, is that he's this big football player, but his passion was art. On the side. And he got into commercial art. And, the cool thing for those guys that came back from World War II and who were fortunate enough to survive is they did have an opportunity to go to college back then on the GI Bill. And so he went from little bitty Laurel, Mississippi up to Chicago to the Academy of Art and got his art degree. And from there, he got into commercial art. This is way back before Photoshop and Illustrator and all that stuff. So he cartooned, all these ads. He would do them by hand, all these little cartoons. And I think on the cover for the podcast, it may have shown the little, we call him Mr. Trap, the little cartoon character that's in the Rattle Trap boxes. To this day, we leave it in there. really kind of as just sentiment and kind of staying true to the roots, because Bill cartooned that little guy years ago. But
That's cool.
yeah, he really was just kind of dabbling in the fishing tackle business for many, many years. And he worked for ad agencies, cartooning ads for, hardware stores or whatever. And then all the fishing stuff was just in the garage, in the kitchen. I mean, they poured lead in the kitchen, the same kitchen they were eating in. They used to pour lead. I mean,
What were they pouring
my
the lead
stepdad
for?
even he was like, man, I think somebody told me that was my stepdad or Bill. See, Bill was my stepdad's dad. That's why we don't have the same last name. But I grew up calling him Pops from the time I was 5, 6 years old, and took him on his last fishing trip. But he would tell me, like, not only would they do that, but they would make the spinner baits on the back porch. They had a spinner bait called a witch doctor, and it was real popular in like the 60s, 70s around Louisiana, Mississippi. And my grandmother would sit out there on the back porch and make them out of safety pins. And so they did all this kind of homemade stuff, and then the early days of Bill Lewis, they were making all kinds of stuff. They made soft plastic worms. They claimed they were some of the first ones to ever make a hot tail worm, they called it. Kind of like we make the Cinco with the little chartreuse tail these days.
Totally.
They claim they were the first ones back then to do that. They had all kinds of crankbaits. I wish I had one of the old catalogs. We could throw some pictures up, but they had one called the Big L. It was like a big fat square bill. They had the deep little N, which I think is now the Bandit 300 series, because they sold that mold to Bandit like years ago because the Rattle Trap got so hot. But you got to realize all this kind of started in the 60s, 70s, and it was a slow progress. They were a very regional company for like a decade or so. And like I say, they started out in the house, then they kind of graduated to a barn. He finally had enough, to get a barn, and had a small crew of like 8 or 10 people. And I remember him talking about the clothesline they had that would run across the barn, and they would hang the baits on the clothesline and run them down. The ladies would put hooks on them, and they'd run down the line and get them off of a clothespin and just package them up. It was real basic,
Totally.
And, I think there was a few things that kind of came together to make the Rattle Trap national. I think one of them was Toledo Bend, of course. Just kind of it came alive during that time. So you had people traveling in from Michigan and everywhere else to come catch a giant Toledo Bend bass. And then they get there and park their boat at the dock, and this crazy old dude would come down there and cut their baits off of their rod and tie a rattle trap on. Bill was known for he would do that. He hardcore tactics. And keep in mind, he's a big old boy. He was an offensive lineman, So,
yeah, you can have it.
People would come out and be like, "What are you doing?" He'd be like, "I'm putting a better bait on for you. Just trust me. You're going to catch twice as many." And they're like, "All right, whatever you say, man." So he kind of bullied him a little bit, I guess.
Crazy.
He did what he had to do. But I heard other stories from people that worked shows with him, like Ken Chamont. He was our old marketing guy. And I can't even tell you the words that he said Bill would say. I don't think they're probably appropriate for our audience. But he said guys would be walking down the aisle at these shows, and Bill would try to stop them. Hey, sir, can I have a minute of your time? And, a lot of times, how it is. You've worked shows. People will ignore you. They just keep walking. Well, Bill would be like, I'm not going to say what he'd say, but he'd say some choice words to him, maybe even cuss him a little bit. And they'd turn around and they'd be like, "What?" They couldn't believe that this guy was talking to him like that. And he would take that attention-grabbing statement and then turn it into, "Well, I just figured, you could give me 30 seconds of your time. You're being kind of rude to me, sir." He would turn it around on them. And then by the time they were done talking, Ken's he wrote him a $10,000 order.
That's a master salesman.
So he was pretty good at sales as far as just, had his little tactics and such. But
yeah, that's awesome.
yeah,
So,
like I was saying though, they made a lot of different baits, and then I think they really went national when Norm Olson. I want to give tribute to the great late Norm Olson. We just lost him this year. Actually, he was the national sales manager, VP of sales at Bill Lewis for many years. He's the one that went out and got the Walmart account, the Bass Pro account, all those big national accounts. Kmart was huge back then, you know. But anyhow, I think that was really kind of the deal. Like it went national. He got it into these more national chain stores. Then you had like Bill's son, Buddy Lewis, who was really good at the legal aspect of trademarking the name Rattle Trap and protecting it because everybody was coming to knock it off, you know. And
Totally.
man, the marketing guy, Ken Chamont, did such an incredible job of marketing that name Rattle Trap and working with all these fishermen. You know, every tournament that is won now, even if it's not a trap, if it's a lipless crankbait, a lot of people will just say trap.
Rattle Trap.
He's ingrained that brand name so well through all the marketing he did in the 80s and the 90s. But you want to give a little bit of tribute to those guys because they definitely built up a powerful brand name. Everett Gill, he ran the plant. You know, back in the day in Alexandria, they were running 3 shifts, 24/7, around the clock, with over 300 employees, and they still couldn't get all the Rattle Trap orders shipped. So people ask, well, why did y'all cut all those baits? Why did you sell the Bandit 300 series to like it was, you know, a different bait beforehand, whatever. And the reason is, I was always told, because they literally could not get the Rattle Trap orders shipped. And so they cut everything else out and just streamlined production on Rattle Trap.
The demand
You got to realize Bill was like late in his career. He was like in his 60s and the 80s, like 70s and the 90s, and then we lost him in his 80s, you know, in 2005 when Bill passed. So from like 1995 or so to about when he passed, the sales, honestly, they declined. And I think, you know, they kind of, you know, you could blame it on a lot of reasons. I mean, you had all these competitors who had gone overseas with their manufacturing, and Bill, just being like the hardcore World War II vet that he was just not going to do it. He's like, we're making it here, you know, or what, not going to make it. But, you know, sadly, by the time, you know, like 2010 rolled around, and I was a young guy, kind of like you, Joey, right out of college, and I was doing marketing work for them. That's what I'd gone to school for. And it came to find out they were in a really bad situation where it was discussed, bankruptcy was being talked about, and
totally,
it was really like, well, Wes, if you want to, you know, try to run it, you know, give it a shot, like we'll give it a go. But it was really bleak. You know, the factory in Alexandria had been foreclosed on. You know, like I say, Bill had passed about 5 years prior, so he wasn't really there with like his strong leadership that had been around for so many years. Just had like a lot of different factors going on.
totally.
But for me, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a marketing guy, but I know this is a great brand that I'm at least going to try, right?
100%.
And thankfully, the IT manager at the time, she was kind of just out of college like me, Dee Davis, just happened to be brilliant. And I was like, Dee, if I can get you to stay and work with this on me, like I've got confidence, you know. And sure enough, like we dug in together. She was really great at all the things that I'm really terrible at, the systems, the organization,
computers.
Yeah, I'm more the people person, like, you know, dealing with, you know, what the staff, like if we had human resource issues, all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, I mean, we didn't have a factory to paint baits in, so we had to lease an auto body paint stall. I just happened to have a friend that had a paint shop in town, like auto body paint shop, and it was pretty big. He had like 10 different stalls that he could paint cars in. And he's like, you know, the last 2 down there, I don't really use them. And so he was like, if you want to rent those, I think it was like $300 a month or something, you know, like whatever. But the challenge with that was just getting people to work there, right? Like you got to convince, you know, a staff. You got to remember, a lot of these people that painted for Bill Lewis, they'd been around for 20 years already, and they had worked in this big, nice facility over there. So now it's like, oh, yeah, I need you to paint baits in this paint stall at our auto body shop, and we don't have air conditioning, you know, and we don't have, you know, in the wintertime, it's like, well, we're going to turn the heater up that they use to cure the paint on cars. So within like 2 minutes, it's 300 degrees, and you're like, all right, that feels good, turn it off. you would sit there for like an hour and just wait for it to, gradually cool back down, and then
bring
everybody
it
would
back
run
again.
out. Anyway, it was something. Just trying to get people to work in the summer, bringing Kool-Aid and lemonade, just whatever to try to make it happen.
Right?
And I'm so thankful for those folks that worked with us. Great people like Marilyn Brown, Alfreda Carter. I mean, Bill Lewis literally wouldn't be here if it wasn't for what they did at that moment. It wouldn't be the same company anyway. I guarantee you that.
Totally.
But yeah, we kind of grinded through that real low point and kept the brand alive, kept shipping orders to smaller accounts, but they had lost the Walmart account. So, I had to go and get that back. And once we did, it was like, well, crap, that's nice that they want to buy baits, but how are we going to ship Walmart painting out of an auto body shop, right? And all these others. So, we kind of scaled it up. We found a factory in Wisconsin, and, those guys really helped us get going on a bigger level. And then we eventually got clearance by the state fire marshal to get our own facility up and running there in Alexandria. And that kind of got things back going. But, we still haven't been foreclosed on. The fact we couldn't get, any kind of banks to work with us or anything like that. So growing the business and scaling the business was very challenging because, in fishing, it's very seasonal, right?
Yeah.
You sell majority of your products from January to June. And so you have to really build your inventory. You have to really build your inventory up from July to August without any money coming in. So if you don't have a bank to work with you, it's really hard to cash flow that. But again, thanks to Dee Davis and a lot of her mastery with numbers and planning, we managed to get by. And then one day I was just driving back from, I think, the auto body paint shop to our office. I would run. Okay, this is how that worked, by the way. I had this little Honda Element, like one of those little box cars, and I would pop the back open, and we'd put all the baits that were painted on these cardboard sheets and stack them into my Honda Element. I would drive them 2 miles down the road to where we would then put the hooks on the baits and package them and then ship them out. But yeah, the little Honda Element, which my daughter ended up driving in high school. But yeah, it got the job done. So, but yeah, once we scaled up and all that, it was kind of like, how do we get it going? And I got a call from a banker one day. I was headed, from the auto body shop, delivering the baits back, and her name was Jana, and she's like, Wes, she worked with Chase Bank, None of the local banks would touch us. We had such a bad reputation at that point, So she was Chase Bank, and she's like, Wes, J.P. Morgan Chase is running this grant program nationwide called Mission Main Street. And I was like, oh, cool, And she's like, I think y'all should apply for that. I was like, oh, yeah, us and like a million other people in the country. Yeah. I'm like, man, I don't have time for that. I'm just trying to keep my head above water here. I can't sit down and, do that. And I kind of just blew her off, But it was like this nagging thought in the back of my head that I was like, man, I think I just told her that everybody else is better than us and we don't have a chance.
Yeah.
And it bothered me. I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to apply just on principle, just to do it, because if you, it's like the saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I went ahead and just forced myself to do it. And, I carved out 3 days in the office where all I did was work on writing the grant out. Kind of told them our whole story about what we were doing, how we were painting baits out of the auto body shop. And anyway, to sum it up, the banker calls me and a month later, and she's like, yeah, well, it turns out there was 23,000 applicants. And I was like, oh, wow, great. And she's like, and you're one of the 10 they picked. And I was like, what?
That's an incredible story.
And so, it wasn't like a huge deal. I mean, in today's financial terms, but for us, it was pretty darn big at that moment. And it opened up the door for us to do some product development so that we could actually go build new molds, work with some larger factories that could really help us scale up, do some marketing, linking up with Mark Daniels. I mean, It was
Yes.
like how we've got this money now to do marketing. It's like, how do we maximize it? And like,
Totally.
I'm a believer, man. I think sometimes the good Lord just kind of smiles on you, because like right about that time, I get an email from Mark, with his resume. I think he was just kind of emailing companies, ones that he liked, that he was hoping to associate with. And I read his resume and everything. I'm like, wow, this dude can catch them. And then, because you had a pretty stout resume from back home, like out west. And, I've made some calls, like everything was checking out. Everybody's like, yeah, he's a stick.
He's the man.
And then, I think you had put on there that you were going on circuit breaker
Yeah.
for FLW. And we had just had Casey Martin on there. And I had seen and in talking to you, I was like, wow, man, you're going to be awesome on circuit breaker, because your personality's good and all that. And you weren't shying away from it. You were excited about it. I remember you telling me how excited you were to go on circuit breaker, and how you couldn't believe like some of these other tour pros you talked to, like, didn't even want to do it.
Yeah.
And you're like, I can't understand like how they wouldn't want that opportunity, and he was just like looking for every opportunity to grow and get out there. And man, it was the best decision I ever made in marketing.
Totally.
Partnered up with MDJ.
So to kind of stay with the history part, Mark, when was the first time you were throwing a rattle trap? I know we talked earlier, or I guess later last week, that you said your dad was, in your mind, Mr. Trap. Like he was the best trap thrower. It's all he did. He kind of taught you that. Tell me about your story with the rattle trap. When did you kind of start throwing it and all that stuff?
Yeah, man. My story goes way back, man. Childhood, like, dude, I don't know, 8, 9, somewhere through there. My dad is still to this day, man, like the hardest core Bill Lewis fan there. I'm talking about the old school Bill Lewis, like Wes spoke about earlier, that I just learned. That sounds like Bill Lewis cartooned up that little image. The guy sitting in the boat with the rod. My dad, I would joke with my dad that he was him, because my dad only fishes with a rattle trap, a 3/4, a 1/2 ounce, 1/4 ounce, chrome and blue, chrome and black, red crawfish. That's it. That's it. That's all he uses. And so growing up as a kid, man, I was very familiar with a trap. I've caught one of my first bass to memory on a rattle trap, on a red crawfish rattle trap on the California Delta. And not just me, you speak with anybody from that region, in many regions of the country, but the California Delta in particular, being a heavily grass fishery, and we have tons of crawfish, and you just have to be throwing some sort of a reddish bait during the springtime. And coming through the grass, there's really nothing better than a rattle trap, man. And so my history with the trap, man, is immense. And it's really dear to my heart, man. And so when I connected with Wes, like he spoke about in a joking way, but this is honest, and a lot of my inspiring pros out there can relate. You get to a point where you need some support and you need some help. And so you always start with the brands that you actually use and you respect and you think highly of. And these are the ones that you're reaching out to. And so I was just new in the game, a rookie, and everything I was shooting out was falling on deaf ears, man. Nobody would return an email. Nobody would return a phone call. I was just a nobody pro trying to make it, man. And I'm so thankful to Wes, man. And it's cool to be able to tell him this face to face. But he knows this. Me and Wes been doing this for a long time. But I'm ever so grateful, man, for him taking a gamble on me, taking a chance on me, saying this seems like a good opportunity, and actually giving me a shot, man. Because without him, without Bill Lewis and the opportunities they given me, I would not be able to make it as a professional fisherman then, as a rookie, and still to this day as a 12-year veteran these days out here on tour, man. So I'm forever grateful. But the trap and me go way back, man, and it's a strong part of my history. Not just me, like I said, my dad as well. And man, yeah, long, a lot of stories there, man.
Totally. I guess kind of diving back into the story part, what would you say your best or your most memorable story fishing a rattle trap, your best fish catch, or both?
Man.
Or like, that kind of, was there a pivotal part in your career, when you caught one on a trap that you really made it, or you made that check that you needed, won the tournament? Do you have anything like that?
I'm gonna give you guys a off the wall kind of a story.
All right.
There was a tournament trail that I started out fishing on the California Delta when I was a young kid, me and my dad, and it was ran by a gentleman. His name was Gene Bushholtz. And if you lived on the California Delta, or if you any kind of familiar with it, you've heard of the tackle store and the tournament trail called the Hook, Line, and Sinker.
Oh yeah.
And that was a big deal back home, like especially if you're young, just getting into the sport. It was very family oriented type of a trail, so a lot of father-son teams, uncle, nephews, that sort of a thing, grandpa, grandson, a lot of novice anglers getting into it, and that was me at the time. And so me and my father fished that trail, and I remember going out one winter. Tournament was in January. Really, really tough bite, man. Me and my dad practiced for it. We couldn't hardly catch anything on jigs, spinner baits, you name it. We called them twitch baits back in the day. That's what everybody knows as a jerk bait, right? Couldn't catch them on twitch baits. We couldn't catch them on nothing, man. It was just one of them practices, and we knew it was going to be a tough tournament. Well, that night I got home, I rigged up all my baits, some jigs. Jig was forever a popular bait on the Delta as well. I had some jigs tied on, had a couple crankbaits, and I remember tying on a Fire Tiger rattle trap, which is still one of my favorite colors.
Still an all-time fish catcher.
That's an all-time fish catcher. On the California Delta, that's a big, big deal in the early spring. I tied on this Fire Tiger trap, and I remember going out. We had a terrible day of fishing, which is crazy, right? We had one bite that day, one bite. And I was fortunate enough to be the person that had it. My dad used to let me run in front of the boat. I had the bite. It was a 9-pounder I caught. The only bite I had that day. And the bite was so tough, I want to say we finished in third place with one fish at 9 pounds. And it was a freaking giant. I still got the picture somewhere. I got to dig it up, Wes. But
total reaction kind of deal, yeah.
Oh,
That's
for
incredible.
sure. And it's so memorable because it was literally the only bite we had. We ended up cashing a check. We might have won big fish. I can't recall. We are talking about the California Delta, so a lot of big ones being weighed in. But
totally,
it was just I will never forget that, man. I remember the exact cast. I remember where we were at. I remember just everything about it. It was an isolated weed bed, a very big grass bed, and I was ripping that thing through it as we all do.
exactly.
Freaking locked up like a beaver grabbed it or something.
You're like giant.
And when it finally come on the side of the boat and I saw that, I'm like, oh my, like get the net, Dad. He scooped that thing up, man. It was 9 something. I can't remember the exact weight, but it was over 9 pounds. And third place finish, one bite, one fish, freaking rattle trap fish, 9-pounder.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
No doubt.
So we've kind of touched on your history of the rattle trap, Mark. Wes's, immense history of the rattle trap. And I kind of want you guys to dive into where, you guys kind of joined forces. You added Mark to the pro staff, and, you've made a bunch of baits with the company, Mark. And you guys, in my mind, since I was a kid, I've looked at Mark Daniels Jr. as the rattle trap guy since I come to GSM. Obviously, Wes, learning about Wes and his helping, build all these baits. He was the brand manager back then, still is now. And just kind of dive into how you guys have started, or how you guys started back then and progressed to where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was before live scope. Start out with that.
Dang, Wes, you gonna go there?
Well, I mean, so we had been like a one bait company for so many years, traps. And so it's like, where do we start? Right? I mean, nowadays, if you get started, you'd probably think, we need to make something that works with the scope, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, like the best-selling lure category was still square bills, like in hard baits, because I guess got to give KVD credit probably for that.
100%. And Rick Clun.
Yeah, even beforehand, but just like the mainstream, like I don't know, it seemed like in the early 2000s, KVD really popularized that category, and so we went after it. We did the SB57. which simply stands for a square bill that's 57 millimeters. And
Well, I didn't even know that.
yeah, yeah,
People don't know that.
yeah. And I know, real creative name, right? But the idea was like it's Bill Lewis branded, and that's the model.
That's hilarious.
The cool part about that bait, and I would say, is that it's got a unique body style and a lip to anything that you really see that's in the mainstream American lure market. There's definitely some Japanese brands that inspired us that we were familiar with before that. But it's got that body's got that honeycomb construction. So it makes the body not quite as thick and clunky as your average crankbait. It gives it a little bit more lively action in the water, kind of like a balsa bait. But with that honeycomb construction, and I wish we had a picture of it. It's one of those where picture's worth a million words. But the honeycomb construction reinforces that body and makes it strong to where you can bump it into just about anything and it won't break. And it's got a circuit board lip, kind of coffin shaped. It's about impossible to get it hung up, coming through cover. Mark, it's your bait, man. What do you want to say anything
Yeah, I
about
kind of want to hear Mark. Mark,
Yeah.
why did you want the bait? What was the reason for it? How did you come up with it? And all that stuff.
So, we obviously everybody knows Bill Lewis for the Rattle Trap, right?
Rattle Trap company, exactly.
And like Wes said, we were a one bait brand for many years. And, I always shot ideas to Wes and just thoughts like, what do you think? What do you guys think about expanding the bait category? I mean, we are a hard bait company. What do you guys think about a square bill? What do you think about like a mid range? Just throwing different things around. And, obviously I have a few different baits, but one that I felt was very necessary in the lineup was what I call a everyday square bill. Now we previously had the Echo, which we still have, which is an awesome crankbait. But in my mind, that's more of a niche square bill, or let me say situational square bill.
Right. Yeah.
Which it excels in that situation.
But I call it the Colorado blade of square bills.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, very hard thump, shallow diving, excellent around grass. Not gonna really get deep down, deflects relatively well, but not gonna really get down, right? And so I wanted something where I could hang out in that 5 to 7 foot category and really get down there. And I'm gonna use my hand as an example, guys. Stick with me here, and get down there and root around and hunt around and deflect off of everything that it contacts and not blow out. That's the key. And what I mean by blowout, you guys know how you reel a crankbait down and it gets to grinding down in the bottom and it's rooting around, and then you lose it. It feels like somebody cut your line. It goes limp, it goes slack. And it's because that bait won't right itself and continue to hunt. It just goes limp. And I wanted to make sure that sucker did not do that. It's one of my biggest things. And so, of course, going through prototypes, we end up perfecting that. But I wanted a bait that is what I call an everyday square bill, that under any circumstance, and I want to throw a square bill, I just grab a bait, tie it on, and it's going to get me through pretty much all circumstances. And that's kind of how my thought and my efforts that went into creating the SB57. Like Wes mentioned, there was a lot of influence from some Japanese brands, multiple, and we just tried to encompass different qualities and bring it to the American market at a much better price point. And I think we knocked it out the park with that.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I'm kind of dying to know. I'm sure other people are. What would you say your 2, 3 go-to colors are, or maybe even like where do you think the ATV is best fished? You kind of say it's an all-around crankbait, but where is your favorite spot to fish an ATV? Like you're going down a bank and you're like, man, I'm picking up and throwing an ATV right there. You know what I mean?
For sure. So obviously we have the SB57, we have the ATV, and we also have the Echo, right? 3 different square bill style baits, which I feel like excel in different scenarios. The moment I see grass, right? Hydrilla, milfoil, eelgrass, coontail, it does not matter. And I feel as though my bait's going to be contacting that grass. That's when I'm undoubtedly grabbing an ATV. That particular square bill excels in grass to me The action is awesome. The colors obviously are great as well. But I really feel like that particular bait excels in grass. And so Dunnersville, we got a championship coming up there here soon. Anytime I'm down in Florida and I know grass is going to be present, I got an ATV title.
Yeah, we kind of skipped over the little transition because we were talking about the SB57 and how we developed that.
Yeah.
But the ATV, that kind of came out. It was an evolution of the SB57.
Yes, it was.
The 57, while like Mark said, it won't blow out. It was tremendous at coming through rock and wood, very durable. The one problem with it is if you got it into some grass, that circuit board lip just wants to eat into it and really not skip out.
Yep.
So we took the lip, kind of like the Echo has on it, put it on the body of the SB57, which is great at action, not blowing out, all that, high speed, low speed. And then we just put a lip that was made for grass. And then we resized it into a small, medium, and large. So we really, honestly, that was when GSM came along and we had more product development funding to do multiple molds, right? So we're like, all right, let's do 3 sizes because that's really what you need. You can't get, a 1.5 is your best all around, but there's times when you need that 1.0 or you need that bigger 2.5. Exactly. But really, it's just, if you look at the body of the SB57 and the ATV, they're identical. It's just a different lip. Yes. And then the sizing of the body is different on the ATV. But yeah, like you were saying, grass, Echo, ATV, hardcover, can't beat SB57.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then I guess kind of going from those crankbaits, and then I really want to dive into kind of your more centered crankbaits like the MR6 Mark, and kind of how did that come to be? What was the reason behind it? Like, even I know that bait when I was from a kid throwing that around, and like, what was the reason that you kind of came up with that? What was the evolution of that? We kind of touched on, the last 3 crankbaits evolution of them. Let's touch on the MR6. Then we can kind of go into asking you all the fun questions about what's your most favorite bait, blah, 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 and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, the MR6, and just to give the viewers context too, that was actually the first bait we worked on. It started with the MR6 was the intro bait. Then we moved to the 57, and then later came the MR12. But the MR6 was a really, really key bait for myself, and I feel like for the Bill Lewis brand. And not just myself. I want to also give credit where credit is due. We had a good friend of mine's, Brian Latimer, also professional angler, on pro staff at the time, and he was also very influential in the development of that bait and really kickstarting the popularity of that bait when it first developed. And so I definitely want to shout my boy out. But
I'll never forget that YouTube video, Broadway. If you YouTube Brian Latimer Broadway, actually that might be an Echo fish. He was constantly catching giants and making cool videos and stuff.
For sure, bro. B-Lab was very influential with the bait as well. Yeah. But that was just a bait, man. Honestly, just total transparency. During a time, all we had was a Rattle Trap, and then we had an Echo, right? In which I already told you, very niche-y bait, right? Yeah. I found myself just digging in my box constantly, picking up a Rapala DT6, right? Which a Rapala DT6 is an amazing bait. Can't take anything from it. But the durability wasn't there.
Exactly.
On a Rapala.
We all know about that breaking when you cast him and stuff.
Yeah, I'd go through a few of them, right? So I wanted something with that size frame. I wanted something that would hit a little harder than a Rapala did, but I also wanted something with much more durability that I could slap around, smack the water, snap the grass off, keep flying around, no problem, and I'm not going to damage anything, right? And then, of course, also we always considered price point. I wanted something that was very affordable that we could get in everybody's hands for a reasonable price. And we went through a lot of R&D, a lot of prototypes before we landed on what is now a MR6, which stands for mid-range 6-foot diver, not a Mr. 6, MR6.
We do get that sometimes.
Confuse that too. A Mr. 6.
So, Mr. 6. You throwing the Mr. 6 around today?
A mid-range 6-foot diver. But that is probably, dude, that bait there is an absolute winner. And if anyone's in the comments, or not comments, but anyone's watching this video and you have not tried a Bill Lewis MR6, that is a 10 out of 10 bait, in my opinion.
It really is. It is.
It really is. From the
I mean, if I have to describe it in the most simple terms, I just say basically a DT6 and a Spur Little John had a baby.
There you go.
It really is like bait breeding. That's kind of what you get right there.
Totally.
Sure. Yeah.
Take kind of the best qualities of some of your, some good baits and make a better bait, in my opinion. But
Love it.
yeah, you're right, Mark. We did do the MR6 first.
Yeah.
So we targeted square bills first, but it was the Echo, and then the MR6.
Yes.
And then the SB57.
Yes.
And then maybe the MR12 next?
MR12, well, as far as, my baits go, but I think that the ATV came after the 57, right? Yes. And then the MR12.
Well, no, the MR12 we did before the ATV, because the ATV was after when we were with GSM. Yep. And the scope stick. We did the ATV and the scope stick about the same time.
Okay.
We did them like all at once because, GSM, we did like, hey,
we're going all in.
Let's do a stinking scope stick. Let's do a
They had a
shallow
couple
suspending, a deep suspending. We even did a floater.
Totally.
Yeah.
Mark, would you say you're pretty influential in kind of the scope stick, or not as much as the MR6 and the other ones?
Not nearly as much, man. Hey,
gotcha.
Of course, again, I just gotta keep it real out here on the podcast. The scope stick was actually a project that Brian initially was working on really closely. And
he's a big dirt bait guy, out at Hartwell.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. So B was working on a lot of that. Ended up, obviously going a different direction. But we were still left with what he had, the work he had left.
100%.
And we certainly wanted a jerk bait, man. And, continue to develop it and R&D it, do some research on it. I had a bunch of prototypes that I fished and tried out before they became what we know now today is the scope stick. And that's another fish catcher, man. Straight up. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So there that is.
Yeah.
So I was way less involved with that than I was obviously the MR6 and some of the others that bear my name.
Definitely. And kind of dive in, I guess, you're talking more about the baits that you were really involved with, like the MR6. Where do you like to throw the MR6? Like, let's say someone's looking at the MR6 in the store. Where would you tell that person to throw, your bait?
Yeah, 100%. MR6, man, is he's kind of he's remember I told you he's a 10 out of 10 bait, man. I honestly, I would tell somebody literally tie him on and go fishing is what I would tell somebody. But if you want to be more specific, obviously any kind of hardcover, rocky bottom, rock transitions, just about every impoundment you'll launch your boat on these days have rip wrap of some sort. You can go down rip wrap lines with him. He's also pretty good in grass, a unique line.
Surprisingly, surprisingly, you're like, whoa, this thing pumps out the grass. Like it's a mid-range crankbait. How's it doing that?
Exactly.
I think it's that curved back on top. Yeah.
It might be the hunchback on there. He comes to grass
kind of
pretty
tilts
quick.
and just
Yeah. So he's a good bait for grass too. If you're looking to get down in that 5 to 7 foot range, but it day in and day out he excels on hard bottom. So many scenarios where I've caught him on an MR6, man. Fishing bridge corners, that's like the most simplistic thing. Hey guys, run to a bridge, you see some riprap, crank this down the side of it. Like that's so simple, right?
Yeah.
And you'll get bit. But rock transitions are one of my all-time favorites, especially this time of year leading into the spawn, the pre-spawn right now.
Yeah.
You see a bait going from sand and all of a sudden it goes to pebble to chunk rock to bluff chunky bigger rock. Phenomenal place to throw MR6. Dude, it's just so many.
I'd say we got them covered on pre-spawn baits with the trap, the MR6, the scope stick. Like, if you want to catch a big pre-spawn bass, we got you covered.
100%, dude. 100%.
So, Mark, let's say you're pulling up to the lake to practice.
Yeah.
Let's say you're no scoping right now. Let's just say like Rattle Trap. I mean, you can use these baits for scoping, like the scope stick.
Sure.
or even a crankbait. What are you looking for, with your Bill Lewis deck? What are you looking for first right now in the pre-spawn? Let's say you pull to like Lake Guntersville, and then we can kind of dive into maybe a different lake across the country. But let's start off with Lake Guntersville. Everyone loves Lake Guntersville right now. It's probably one of the best.
G-Ville's popping off right now. I mean, I got at least 3 original rattle traps. If I'm at G-Ville, I got a crawfish color of some sort, Toledo Gold, red crawfish, or probably Rayburn Red there. Then I got a couple of hammer traps tied on. Got to have some hammer traps on. Rayburn Red again. Oh, I left one out. I might have 4 original traps. I got one with Royale. Got to have him. Hammer trap, gold, black back, orange belly, fish catcher. That new oyster color that we've developed in so many of our baits, the ATV, not the scope stick, the hammer trap has it. So many of our baits.
Yeah.
That oyster is a fish catcher, off-colored, little stained water. He's a great shad imitator.
I give Crispin props for that, man. It's one of his
Absolutely,
colors.
one of his. Crispin came through.
It catches them, man. That's a good color.
It definitely gets them, dude. So that oyster's good. But it's springtime, man. So anytime I'm from, I don't know, I start calling it spring. A lot of people think I'm crazy. It's springtime to me, January 15th. And what that means is it won't reflect that water temperature wise. It won't reflect that air temperature wise. All kind of nasty storms pushing through, etc., across the country.
Yeah.
But that biological clock for the bass starts.
The days start getting longer, huh?
Yeah. Days. 2 minutes here, minute 30 seconds there. Me and you, we don't feel that. But them 6, 7, 8, 10 pounders, they know. They're like, oh, it's time. Let me get
moving up.
Yeah. Let me start sliding, all this. And it is just the time of year. Like Wes said, if you want to catch a big bait, a big fish, we got you covered here at Bill Lewis. It is a great time for the trap, for the square bill, for the jerk bait. It's just that time. And so pre-spawn for me starts about January 15th all the way through, mid-April. 100%. And I'm humongous on crawfish. Love crawfish colors this time of year.
Great. Awesome. And what are you kind of looking for in the lakes? Like you pull up to, I guess, Guntersville. What are you looking for? What are you driving your boat to first?
In the pre-spawn, like now?
Yeah. In the pre-spawn.
Yeah, so I'm definitely looking at secondary points, even main lake points, leading into spawning areas. And this stuff sounds so rhetorical, and you just hear guys say this all the time. It just sounds like, this is just what they say. No, this is actually the things that they get on, and this is what we do, honestly. So if you can imagine these areas where these fish end up spawning, where you've seen them spawn in years prior, well, prior to them getting there, they set up and stage outside of these areas, deep water nearby. And then they start gradually, as the water temperature warms, making their ways into the pockets in the bays and places where they're going to nest, right? So I'm looking for subtle points closer to the main lake, but still, kind of at the front of those spawning areas. Any kind of hard bottom, isolated hard bottom around these areas where these are stopping points, rest stations, if you will. Well, they'll kind of gather, and a lot of times there'll be multiple fish, even sometimes schools of them, right, in these sorts of places. And it can be, like I said, it can be grass points. It can be hard bottom, isolated hard bottom, isolated rock. And, of course, I'm using my electronics to find these sorts of places a lot of time behind the steering wheel.
Totally.
These are areas where these fish congregate prior to getting to these spawning areas. And so these are the sorts of places that I'm looking for right now. Like I said, leading up until the end of March, first week or so of April.
Totally. Awesome. And then I kind of forgot to include this one, but I think we got to touch on the hammer trap. It's like the revamped version of the original rattle trap. Wes, I know you had a lot to do with it. Mark, I think you had a little bit to do with it as well, if not even more than I'm knowing. Can you guys just kind of touch on that, specifically Wes, Mark, too, if you want to chime in, that'd be awesome. Just the reason for it, the revamped version of the rattle trap, and let's kind of dive into that.
Yeah, I mean, and I got to give our whole staff on the product development team. Now, that's one of the blessings with GSM. We've got so much talent, so many resources. We got, young Jack Dice helping out, and Crispin Pally with his years of experience in lure design. But I think the one thing that really sets that one apart is just the vibration and the way it hits, the way it hammers. I mean, hence the name Hammer Trap, right? I mean, it feels like a bladed jig coming through the water pretty much. And the two different size offerings being a 3/8 and a 5/8 versus that.
And the new mini, and we got the mini now too.
Don't forget about the 3/16.
Exactly.
I love that little joker, man, because you can kind of like you were talking about earlier, Mark, with the SB57 and how it doesn't blow out.
Yes.
It's really cool to have a small little lipless bait that you can crank at a pretty good speed over some grass. They won't blow out. That joker digs in and tracks really well. But yeah, I mean, the Rattle Trap was made originally in the 1960s. It was definitely time to evolve and bring out some different features. We know there's a large menu of lipless crankbaits out there these days, but we definitely have the original rattle bait. I won't say we're the original lipless. I mean, there was cotton cordels and bayou boogies, but what Rattle Trap did that kind of changed the game, so to speak, in lure design was put rattles in a bait. Like before that, people didn't really even think that much about what's a bait sound like. They just tried to make it run correctly, But now it's like, all right, do we make it knock? Do we make it rattle? Do we make it silent? But the Hammer Trap definitely. I mean, for me, it's the vibration. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, it's it's multifaceted. The Hammer Trap. It's a really, really, really good bait, man. On a slack line out west where I'm from, Clear Lake, California, you pull up there, everybody knows you better be yo-yoing a trap. That is just one of the best ways to catch them there. But what's important when you do that, when you do yo-yo a trap and you pull it to you and it comes off the bottom a foot, 2 foot, or however far you pull it, when you kill that bait on a slack line, that Hammer Trap, it shimmies on its way down. And that was one area where other brands have kind of set themselves apart from the original Bill Lewis.
Absolutely.
And a lot of anglers started leaning that way is just because the bait did a little more, right?
Yeah.
Like Wes said,
it gives it a little more hang time over the grass.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And, a little shimmy to it. It doesn't hurt, like a little dying fish or something dancing on his way up to the bottom.
Like a flutter spoon kind of deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we incorporated that, and I was really happy to see that, man. And I felt like it was just something that we needed in the lineup, and we knocked it out the park. Dude, the Hammer Trap is an amazing bait, and I'm sure anybody listening to this can attest. If you've thrown it, it is bad to the bone.
Totally.
I was watching the story from our tournament out at Rayburn this week. Joey, were you the one putting that on there? There was a young guy.
Yeah, I was over there recording them. Exactly.
Had the white crawfish OG trap, and he said he caught a bunch on that, and then he pulled out that Rayburn Red. I think
the new Hammer Trap.
Baton Rouge, I think is what we call it in the Hammer Trap.
Yep.
Which is kind of interesting. That name started with the scope stick because Baton Rouge means red stick.
Right.
We just kind of accidentally brought it over right past the hammer. Doesn't make as much sense on the Hammer Trap, but that's what it's called. Baton Rouge. You got the white belly. It's really a replication of what is the original Rayburn Red.
Yes.
You hear so many people say, "Oh, I caught it on a Rayburn Red Rattle Trap." Honestly, the old timers at Rayburn, they're talking about red shad.
Yes.
That's what the color's called if you want to look it up on the website.
Yes.
It's a solid red trap. It's got a little gold rim on the shoulder, a black back, and a white belly. It's not Rayburn Red Craw, though, the one that a lot of people think. The original Rayburn Red is a nickname. It's really called a red shad. I always say the best ones get nicknames.
Nicknames, yeah, 100%.
So, anyhow, but yeah, Joey, I saw you filming that guy. And how big was that one he caught on that Hammer Trap?
It was a 731 or 737, something like that. And he's like, I literally just grabbed it out of the box. He said first cast, he fired out the real boat into a 7-pounder. It was unreal.
That is
first
crazy.
cast throwing it. And he's like, they've been throwing the original all day. They had their limit, but they needed one more. And that first cast on it, they caught a 7. It's crazy, right?
That thing's no joke, bro. It really is.
Mark, didn't you catch the big bass in the Classic when it was in Knoxville on a trap?
Yeah, I did.
The first time?
I forgot about that. Yeah. That was
it Yeah.
That was the class. That was 2018. Yes, I did. I
Yeah,
caught a
that's what-
big bass at a
When he
big
asked you earlier about memorable catches, I was like, well, what
I
about
know.
the classic?
What about that one of the classic Knoxville?
Dude, I went to thinking about my childhood and totally forgot about that one.
Yeah.
I caught that fish was 6'8", if I'm not mistaken, which on that pond is a big one.
Monster. I live on it. It's a monster.
Okay, dude, that was a freaking big one.
Yeah.
And it was I caught that one on red crawfish on boy Ducky's bait.
46R, yep. Red
46
Cross.
hard, man.
Same one Duckett won the Classic on in 07. That was a crazy story too, like because he was catching those fish. He was catching spots.
Yeah.
Lay Lake out of the bottom of a creek, and he was like you were talking about earlier, yo-yoing the bait at Clear Lake.
Yeah.
Well, he was doing that in the bottom of the creek, and for the young ones out there that don't really know yo-yoing as much, I mean that's letting that trap hit all the way nose down on the bottom and pumping it off the bottom like a jig, right? Or like a Texas rigged worm almost. That's how Boyd was fishing it, and he'd get that bait in the boat, and you'd see it on camera. He'd have leaves on the hooks. He'd be picking the leaves off. But
slime.
He said it was a sure thing. By like 9 o'clock, he'd have a limit of spots, and then he could go to the grass beds and start flipping for a kicker, right? And that was
exactly.
Yeah, it was that same color, that
And
old red crawfish.
Put that
46R. Yeah,
combination together. Yeah, that's a bad. Listen, California Delta, where I'm from, there's not a single angler that launches their boat that ain't got that bait in their boat. Not one. Not one.
Yeah. The stripers like to eat it pretty good out there too, right?
Yeah, I wasn't even going to give that secret up, Wes. You gave up the secret.
You gave it up to the world.
Hey, there's somebody at home right now pissed off because you just said that.
I thought that was common knowledge. I didn't know.
A lot of guys know about that. That's a big deal for sure.
So, Mark, kind of what would you say is the most sleeper bait in the Bill Lewis lineup? We've got traps, we've got jerk baits,
are we talking baits. Like what the brand is now when all the baits or like old school?
I'm talking all the baits, what the brand is now.
Man, that's a tough question. But it's a tough one.
I feel like it's the MR6 myself. I just feel like it really is a 10 out of 10 bait. And I think it gets overlooked. I think because people just don't get as excited about maybe mid-range crankbaits as they used to.
Totally.
Well, like you started the conversation off before we even got into all of it, Wes. You mentioned something. Forward-facing sonar has just completely changed our sport. And so a lot of these baits, which were staples for years and years and years and years and years, have taken a mega backseat here in recent times, unfortunately. But I think we're going to see a resurgence of this here now and even more so in the future. So
100%.
But I'm gonna give y'all my bait. What you think it's an MR6? I'm shocked by that.
I just think I think it gets overlooked now, like in 2025. I think it gets overlooked. I don't think a lot of people realize how awesome that bait is.
I don't know, dude. That's a bad boy. I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go old school because I got an old soul, man. I do. And it's the 1/4 ounce original Rattle Trap.
Oh, that is a good one.
All time. That is
a good one.
All time.
And I've seen Nick LeBrun had a really good tournament last year at the James River. He come up to me after that tournament. He said, "Dude, I caught him on your bait." And I'm like, "Of course, the tournament's over, right? He didn't smash him. I ain't caught hardly nothing." I'm like, "You caught him on my bait? What bait is that?" He's like, "Dude, I smashed him on that 1/4 ounce trap." And I said,
"Oh, that's awesome."
And that week, I was just distracted by so many other things. I never even tied one on, just to be completely honest. And that goes back to that. It's like that is a bait that I have absolutely destroyed them on multiple occasions. That is, I feel like most guys don't throw that bait. They just don't. And I usually throw it in 2 colors. Chrome and blue 1/4 ounce trap is my all-time favorite. All time. But then I also will throw it in a crawfish color too. And it's generally, if I'm going to throw a crawfish color in that bait, it's generally more so depth dependent than it is me trying to mimic a smaller bait more so. But with the chrome blue, I'm generally trying to mimic a smaller a much smaller bait fish that we encounter on tour all the time, and it just fits the bill so much. Dude, that's another one that's a freaking 10 out of 10. If you have not tied on, you guys need to try a 1/4 ounce trap.
And it does get overlooked by a lot of like really good experienced fishermen. Overlook that bait.
Exactly.
I caught my PB on Gunnersville, not on a 1/2 ounce, but a 1/4 ounce. And the reason I was even throwing it is because Gerald Swindle told me he caught a 10 on it earlier that week at Gunnersville.
That's
so
crazy.
it is a big fish bait, man.
There you go.
That little bitty 1/4 ounce
trap, exactly.
Because you can work it through those shallow weeds and stuff, and hop it around, and it just flutters and moves. That is a good sleeper
really
bait.
Good bait.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Awesome.
For sure.
And then Mark, one last question for you.
Yeah.
Is it, you kind of might have said it earlier. What is your biggest fish on a Bill Lewis bait? Is it that 9-pounder that you said earlier in the podcast, or you had a different story you could tell us?
Jeez, man. Let's see. I gotta think about it. I caught a 815 last year on scope stick at Toledo Bend. That was pretty cool.
Yeah,
got that one on video.
That was on camera, yeah.
Yeah, man. That's always fun. But I don't know if that's my biggest, dude. I got the 9 something, obviously, when I was, 12 or however.
The original trap, yeah.
On an OG Fire Tiger. Let's see. Dude, I've caught so many big ones. I lost one, dude, and I hate to talk about fish losses. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm gonna do this. It's nothing but fishermen watching this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Lost 2020, 2 years ago on an SB57 at this local lake here up on my house. I promise you, was over 10.
God.
I had my dad with me, and it was the first day I got my aluminum boat. I took it out. I took 2 rods. I had 2 baits. I had an MR6 and an SB57 on the whole boat. That was it. I said, Dad, I'm just going to break my motor in, but we'll stop and we'll make a couple casts. Sure enough, I pull in his pocket. I hook up in his face. Dude, I fight it. It gets on the side of the boat. It's like tired. I'm like about to go grab it.
Yeah.
And then it does like that last minute. Oh, and it goes. I said, oh my gosh, bro, you got to be kidding me. That was probably the biggest one, but I didn't catch it. So I can't really talk about that fish. So I'm going to go with the 9-pounder when I was 13.
Sweet. Awesome.
On the trap. Yeah, man.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mark. For your time tonight, Mark, and Wes. Thank you for jumping on.
Yeah, man.
See y'all soon, Mark. Good luck in your upcoming tournaments. Where you head next?
I got I leave here in just a few days on March 1st, so in about 1 week from today. Nice. Headed over to South Carolina to Lake Murray. I think that's going to be a fish catching machine over there, and I will have SB57s, MR6s. Original trap is great there too, and scope sticks tied on. You count on. Yes, sir.
Sweet. Well, thank y'all so much.
Not a problem. Y'all be good. Y'all have a good night.
Oh, there we go. Oh my gosh, this is